Nigerian senators have initiated moves to overturn President Muhammadu Buhari's veto of the 2021 Electoral Act bill. Arise News sister platform This Day newspaper, in a report in Wednesday's edition of the paper, says the senators have begun gathering signatures to enable them override the president's veto. The report says at Tuesday, more than 70 senators had signed up to override the presidential veto. The constitutional requirement is that 2/3 of 109 members of the Senate, amounting to 73 senators, are needed for the first chamber of the Nigerian legislature to override the presidential veto. Although the situation in the House of Representatives was not as heated as the Senate, the House leadership said while the bill might not have received presidential assent, it was within the responsibility of the Parliament to decide the best way forward, adding that it would resume efforts to reform the electoral system next year. Earlier on, President Buhari's letter was read at the start of plenary on Tuesday by Senate President Ahmed Lawan after the senators came out from a closed-door session which lasted some 40 minutes. In the letter, the president explained that his decision to withhold assent to the Electoral Act Amendment Bill was informed by a thorough review of advice from ministries, departments, and agencies of government.
To deepen this discussion around this very interesting update, we are now being joined at first by the linchpin of that resistance in the Senate, Senator George Sekibo, and a member of the People's Democratic Party who represents Rivers East Senatorial District, Otumba Biodun Ajiboye, a public affairs commentator, media practitioner, and political analyst, Samson Itodo of Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth, and Advancement, and Dr. Yunusa Tanko, the head of Public Affairs Bureau, National Consultative Front. Welcome to you all. Thank you for joining the program. Sekibo will join us later on the program, and we will start with Itodo in Abuja, Samson Itodo in Abuja. Good afternoon. What do you make of this? 70 senators good afternoon, they have got signatures. We are waiting for 2/3 of the majority. What is your take on the situation and how it is playing out since the days when the president declined the assent to the bill?
Well, thank you very much. And it's YAGA Africa, not Youth Initiative for Advocacy, Growth and Advancement. I think the action taken by some senators in direct response to the president's decision to withhold assent to the electoral bill, it's in tandem with the wills and aspirations of the Nigerian people. And I say this because, first, Nigerians are disappointed, civil society disappointed with the president's decision. More disappointing is the fact that the president waited until the effluxion of the 30 days required before he communicated his decision to the National Assembly. If you look at the reasons he advanced for declining assent, quite frankly, those are inexcusable reasons, and they don't in any way provide any cogent justification why the president withheld assent to a bill that enjoys popular support, a bill that would radically transform our electoral process, deepen the quality of our elections, increase the integrity quotient, strengthen democratic institutions. But it's sad that the president declined assent to this bill, citing I would say very fallacious reasons. The National Assembly has two options. The first is to override the president's veto. They've got the constitutional power to do so. The fundamental question is whether they will muster the required number, that's 2/3 majority, both in the Senate and in the House of Reps. We're yet to hear from the National Assembly what's the outcome of the proceedings at the Senate. But if the feelers that we get suggest that the Senate has resolved to wait for the House, and when the House reconvenes in January, both chambers will take a joint position. So they've got that option of overriding the president. The second option before them is to review or perhaps consider the president proposal on the amendment to Section 87 that deals with the nomination of candidates. And in this case, will be to retain the provisions in the current law, which is the 2010 Electoral Act as amended, that provides that parties have a latitude to select the mode of nomination of candidates, whether direct or indirect primaries. But it's disturbing that this is where we are. And you know, this process commenced about 2 years ago. We're about 425 days to the 2023 elections. The primaries for the Ekiti governorship elections are due to commence on the 4th of January 2022. You have FCT municipal elections. Now, what this decision by the president has done, it has made the entire process inconclusive. And we're going to be dealing with a lot of logistical, financial, and programmatic challenges in the build-up to these elections. I wished that he had listened to Nigerians, he had upheld his commitment and his promise, and assented to this bill. And if there's any need to amend some sections, he would have sent an amendment bill, just like he did for the Petroleum Industry Act.
All right, let me quickly bring in Biodun Ajiboye. You know, you've been listening to Samson Itodo talk on about his view, but I wanted to gauge your own thoughts regarding the number of senators that have already signed, I mean, given their signatures to veto the electoral bill. It'll be interesting to gauge your thought first, and then secondly, to gauge your thoughts regarding what Samson has said regarding Nigerians are disappointed with the president, and that he waited to the last minute, and that the reasons that he gave are fallacious. So how do you react to all of that? And then your comments regarding the over 70 senators that have already signed.
Well, thank you very much. Interestingly, that the senators are spoiling for a fight is not strange. The only thing is that we really never thought that this 9th Assembly will get into a frosty relationship with the executive. We never thought it, because when this 9th Assembly came, it was orchestrated, it was planned on a peaceful relationship kind of modality. The Saraki's Senate was purely antagonistic of the executive, and the executive, they were, you know, cat and mouse. So we felt, and we saw what happened to quality of decisions of that time. It wasn't good enough for everybody, but we thought that it will not get to this. But now that it has gotten to this, the Senate has a right to say, we had enough time to peruse this policy. We tinkered with this policy sufficiently well enough. We sought public opinion. So why would you say no? You have a right to say, okay, if we can override you, let's give our democracy a try. Let's test our democracy properly. I don't see anything wrong in that. But what I feel is a problem is the fact that the quality of legal advice the president is getting is suspicious. And he has to be careful about that. He has to be careful about who advises him and what motive does the advisor have. If he's not wary of it by now, then his legacy will be jaundiced, jeopardized, and, you know, endangered. So if he cares about his legacy, then he should care about the quality of legal advice he's getting. I feel leadership has a responsibility to have an avalanche of a wide gamut of advice, opinions, you know, interpretation. The law is about interpretation. If a man walks in here and interprets the best way he knows, 1,000,001 other lawyers will interpret 1,000,001 other ways. So the president needs to get a lot of legal opinions, aggregate them properly. He should be able to take a decision that will be pleasing to a wide range of Nigerians, whereby he's taking an advice from one person, legal advice from the legal officer, and the legal officer seems, the public opinion is that the legal officer has an interest, and therefore the quality of advice is given Mr. President is not biased, so to speak. And if the president boxes himself into that kind of corner, then we have a problem. That's all.
Mr. Ajiboye, do you think the National Assembly has the temerity to take on this task before January, or as January comes?
Well, I don't know what task is ahead of them now. You mean overriding the president?
Overriding the process.
They've started. I hope they have the guts. For me, I am a loyal party member. And it's a test of democracy. If they feel they want to test waters, test their democratic strength, they can go ahead. I don't see anything wrong in going ahead. If the president could decline that assent without actually taking their leadership into private consideration, what I expected is to call the leadership of National Assembly and say, gentlemen, this is what is likely to be my decision. How do we go about it? Where the leadership is of the same party.
Right.
We shouldn't be seen to be antagonizing ourselves. How do we go about it? Let's debate it again. Let's come to a common, understanding of what is rational, what is reasonable, what is acceptable. If they have settled all of that at leadership level, we won't have the kind of crisis we're having now.
All right, let me bring in Samson Itodo. Samson, one of the things I wanted to ask you about is to do with CSOs, because most of them are asking for the National Assembly not just to override the president's veto, but they're also asking that after amendments have been made, to transmit the bill back to the president for assent within the next 30 days. It's one thing to actually ask for an override, but it's another thing to actually put a time frame and a timeline as well. So do you not think that's a tall order? What are your thoughts? What's your take? How do you see this?
First, let me put on record that I support the position taken by civil society with respect to the timelines proposed and demanded. And the reason why the timeline was imposed was in recognition of the fact that we are in a national election emergency. There are three things we must note. First, this bill, the electoral bill, radically transformed the timelines for the conduct of specific election-related activities. For instance, INEC is required, based on the provision of the electoral bill, to issue a notice of election 365 days to the date of elections. And so by February, INEC is required to issue notice of election. The bill also provides that INEC, the electoral bill, provides that INEC would receive all the funding it requires for general elections 1 year before the date of an election. Therefore, in the current appropriation bill, it is expected that INEC should receive all the funding it requires for the 2023 elections. And why was that amendment proposed? It was proposed drawing from the mischief that we experienced in 2018-2019. You recall that the budget for 2019 elections was about 189 billion. The funding, about 65% of that money only got to INEC 6 months before the elections. The other 35 or 40% got to INEC in December of 2018. And that's about 60 days to the conduct of the presidential elections. So when people talk about postponement of elections, we also need to look at what point in time that the funding for election was released by INEC. That's why the accelerated consideration of this bill will fast track and help the process of preparations for the elections. The second point is this proposed bill will require INEC to amend its guidelines, to amend the regulations, as well as the manual for the conduct of elections. Now, check. There will be limited time for INEC to review guidelines before the conduct of whether the Ekiti, the Osun, and the 2023 elections.
Yes, Mr.
The third critical point, which are the heart of this.
Mr. Itodo, just a minute. We are now being joined by our Arise National Assembly correspondent, Amaka Okoye. We have a couple of questions for her. Good afternoon, Amaka. Please, can you update us on what has happened so far?
All right, Hawa, let's begin with what happened yesterday. We know that at some point there was the conversation of collection of signatures from other senators to override Mr. President's veto. And we understand that over 73 senators have done that, but of course we don't know the names of those who have done that. So, however, today when they came in, they also had a closed-door meeting, a closed-door session rather. And after that, we were told, just like the House of Reps, they are going to move it, this bill till January. And the reason why they are going to do that is because they want to be able to consult with the House of Reps and, of course, their own constituents when they go on the break, so that they will be able to now come to a conclusion. So as at now, there is a pause, or the bill is pending. In fact, they've moved on to other conversations. Now they're still in session, and what is happening is the clause-by-clause consideration of the appropriation bill. As you do know, yesterday, the House of Reps said they're going to move it till January and get direction, from the Senate when they would have consulted. Typically, as you do know, the National Assembly, both houses will have to consult and then come to a unanimous agreement on issues. So that's what we are seeing now. We're just waiting for them as they go, do the clause-by-clause consideration of the appropriation bill, Hawa.
All right then, Amaka Okoye, many thanks for bringing us up to date. I'm sure you let us know if there's any changes whatsoever. We'll keep in touch. All right then. All right, let's get back to you, Biodun, regarding what we're discussing at the moment. So they're moving the bill to the discussions to January. What do you make of that?
Well, just like the other fellow spoke now, it is going to be making our arrangement more difficult because there's an election in Osun, there's an election in Ekiti, and certain things ought to have been cleared out before these elections can be legitimately said to take place or to have taken place. So therefore, it means that the action of the president or the reactionary action of the Senate is going to delay our electoral process by a couple of days, weeks, or even months. Because if they go for an override, they need to give adequate notice again, 30 days and all of that. It would have eaten deep into the time of Ekiti primaries and perhaps Osun. So that is a disadvantage, but I guess we can discuss it, we can manage through. But it's a major issue as well.
Given the nature of the circumstances and the timeline involved, especially with regards to the elections that are coming up in Ekiti and other places as well, before the general elections for 2023, is there any way by law or otherwise that they can speed up the process just because of the gravity of the situation?
Well, what can happen is another doctrine of necessity, if necessary. What do I mean? Let the presidency and the National Assembly meet and find a way to resolve. Either you accept the decline of assent of Mr. President and we move on. Because if you look at it, what the president has actually said is neither here nor there. All those 14 points, as a matter of fact, are not peculiar to direct primaries. If you say direct primary has problems, indirect primary could have bigger problems. If you cite insecurity, in 2015, in 2019, we did direct primary for Mr. President. Was insecurity not there? If you say it's expensive, is the indirect primary not expensive when the governors just choose, decides to choose the delegates and give them any amount of money whatsoever? Is that not as expensive?
Just to interrupt you, we have another person joining the conversation. We have Dr. Yunusa Tanko, the head of Public Affairs Bureau, and he's joining us now. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining the program. Can we get your own opinions on how everything has transpired?
Thank you. Okay, good afternoon, Nigerians. And it is unbelievable that Mr. President is trying to throw away, or he has already thrown away, his legacy. A lot of people believe that Mr. President come with the tuga of sanity, sincerity, and the love for the people. All of these things now have been thrown to the annal of history. People will find it difficult to trust him now with this particular saying that I'm coming from a background of integrity, and that really put the country in a lot of danger and our democracy. The situation of the president talking about.
All right, then it looks like we've lost connection, but we will sort it out and get him back soon enough. But let me go to Samson Itodo of Yaga Africa. Before we went to our Arise correspondent earlier on, you were talking. I was asking you your opinion about the 30 days time lapse that you talked about, and I want to sort of find out what you think the repercussions are if that. Or if those 30 days elapses and there's still no concession whatsoever, what's likely to happen then?
I can't, it's inconceivable that within the next 30 days, the National Assembly and the presidency won't conclude this process. Because what they will be simply doing is undermining the integrity of the 2023 elections. Secondly, they'll be telling Nigerians, particularly the president, that he's not interested in leaving a legacy of an electoral law that guarantees the transparency and credibility of our elections. And this does not bode well for our electoral democracy. And lastly, the point is we are in a national election emergency. If we want to ensure, and the points that the president advances, you know, for his decline, he talks about insecurity, he talks about infringement on the rights or encroachment on the independence of political parties. All of these that he has raised are actually a consequence of the delay in assenting and concluding this process. So I hope that he understands the implications of not fast-tracking this process. And if the president has only raised a singular issue on the bill before him, the National Assembly can, if they override, that's fine. If they don't, and they choose to retain status quo, and retain status quo mean leave the parties to determine whether direct or indirect, this is something that can be done within a particular sitting. It doesn't require any long or convoluted process. They can do that in one sitting, the same way that they have considered several bills, even though those bills are anti-people, the same urgency that we see in the consideration of other bills can be exerted in the consideration of the electoral bill. And once it goes to the president, if the president has reviewed the bill and he only found fault in just one provision, I expect that when the National Assembly transmits the bill back to the president for assent, it shouldn't take up to a week for him to assent to the legislation. In the event he fails to do so, it then means that all the speculations that this current administration is not committed to bequeathing to Nigerians a new electoral law will become, will gain substantial currency and perhaps becomes the reality. But in this case, they have an opportunity within the next 30 days to conclude this process in the interest of our democracy, in the interest of the public. And any attempt to not conclude this, I think it will be a negation and repudiation of public interest.
Mr. Ajiboye, in light of the short timeline and the urgency of what we are in this current situation, I want to read a quote from the Rivers State governor, who is of the PDP. He's gone on record to say that declining the bill is an attempt to deny Nigerians a free, fair, and credible elections. And he's also claiming that discerning minds can tell that the direct primaries were inserted into the bill as a ploy for the president to refuse the bill. Can you tell me your thoughts on this?
That's neither here nor there. The basic issue here is simple. The president is harping on direct primaries. The bill is not only about direct primaries. It's just one of those things. There's this transmission of electoral
results.
You understand? But if we talk about direct primaries, the president hasn't actually said anything that appears to be considerate of the Nigerian democracy. I wish he didn't come out with this, because you can't be reprobating and appropriating at the same time. You can't be talking about insurgency or talking about insecurity as a reason for determining or not allowing us to go with a mode of election. We're going to have general election, any which way. Will the insecurity, will it have left? The general election would be more explosive than the direct primaries. So if you weigh the scale of participation, that the general election, which will be, which will come, will even be more, like I said, explosive than the direct primaries. Then why stop direct primaries? Why cite insecurity as a reason? Why cite expensive? Why cite marginalization? Why cite, I can't understand. And that's why I said that the quality of advice Mr. President is getting is becoming worrisome. I would expect going forward that Mr. President should actually gather a pool of legal luminaries. He shouldn't stop his legal advice at the legal officer of the Federation, that is the Attorney General. It is rumored that the Attorney General has, ulterior motives. Don't forget, Attorney General is working in tandem with the executive the President foisted on the party. The party is bleeding. Our party is bleeding because of certain decisions that Mr. President took. And right now, we're not even sure. Look at just yesterday or day or so, the Anambra election, look at the court judgment on the Anambra election. It was as bad as we didn't have a candidate. And we want to get into general election with that mode. Look at the judgment of Ondo. The judiciary had told us more than in enough long terms, in enough unequivocally, that the APC is not doing something right. If you go into election this way, you are likely not to even have any candidate, presidential or governorship. So, talking about direct primaries, the governors wanted indirect primaries so that they can anoint, appoint, and select as they want. The generality of the party preferred direct primaries because then you can test your democracy properly. People can queue up behind whoever they felt was right. We did it for Mr. President. So why can't we do it now? So his reasons are not really very... no, they are not. Okay. And that's the truth.
All right, let me quickly bring in Samson Itodo. Samson, if you're still with us, I want to talk about the president as well, just very briefly. Do you think by any chance that he's playing the same game? Do you think by any chance that he's playing the same game that he did in 2018 with the 2018 Electoral Amendment Bill, which he declined quite a number of times as well? Do you think he's playing that same game in 2018, in 2021?
One of the things we're taught in public policy and research is if something happens once, it is random. If it happens twice, it's a trend. If it happens a third time, then it's proof. This is the 5th time the president is declining assent. It is clear that the spate of declined assent under his administration puts to question his commitment to electoral reform. And honestly, I'm ashamed for the president because this is not a legacy that a president of Nigeria, in contemporary Nigeria, should have. And I just hope that he rises above his personal interest, above the interest of the people who are around him, to look at the overall interest and what's in our best interest, or the interest of our democracy. But this is not uncharacteristic of the president, and it's very sad, very, very sad and disappointing. And I hope that he would in the days ahead take a different position he has taken on this electoral bill.
We sincerely hope so, and we thank you all for joining us for our discussion this afternoon. Biodun Ajiboye, Samson Itodo, and Dr. Yunusa Tanko. Thank you all.